Well, hello everybody. Larry Young here again with another segment of Ola Man Living Life with Purity. And on this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the power of the word no and how hard it is for many of us to say that, but how powerful it is when we use it in a constructive way. Now, a lot of people may not know my background or what I've been doing lately, but I've been working on trying to rehabilitate dogs that were destined for being put down because of behavioral issues. So I'm trying to work with one right now to try to get her to where she's a good companion and knows the meaning of words and basic commands. And one of those is no. And this dog is doing exceptionally well once she realized what no meant and that the boundaries that it represented. And then once she had those boundaries in place, she became a whole lot more lighthearted and a whole lot more happy because she wasn't feeling like there was going to be another correction coming at any given time. If she stayed within the limits that were pre-assigned, everything's cool. But if she gets outside of that, well, then there is a constructive element of correction that I have to take, and she doesn't like that too much. But it's not a beating or anything like that. It's just she's getting a different non-reward for her bad behavior. So, but this is kind of what's going on in our community at large right now. And it just seems so coincidental that I wrote some notes down here. I want to go through this here, and then this may set a few people on fire right now, but I think with this being Easter weekend right now, it's a good time to light a couple fires. So, Adu Annie Carnes. No, I don't know if any of you know that name, but she was a character in an old Broadway play in a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical called Oklahoma. And Adu Annie Carnes was a delightful young lady who was having troubles with her man relationships. And she was being instructed by another one of her colleagues there that she can't go around kissing every guy that comes up to her. And she said in her own defense, she says, "Oh, I've known since I was 10 years old what's the right way and the wrong way to do things, but now it just seems that I just can't say no." And it seems that a lot of us are falling into that trap right now. We're all becoming a little bit of an Adu Annie Carnes in our lives. We know what the right thing is to do, but when the time comes up, a lot of us want to be nice, and we don't want to make waves, and we want to kind of not say anything because it might upset somebody. Well, had somebody told Annie Carnes to stop doing what she's doing, as she did in this episode of that play, her life forever changed after that because the men didn't take her for granted anymore when she said no. And that's a big turning point for a lot of people's lives. So with that in mind, we all start off knowing the right things. Our parents do the best they can with us, at least they did with my generation. I don't know exactly what happened in previous ones, but there was a definite disconnect that happened. And we'll try to discuss those and see what the ways are going to be to try to correct some of this, trouble that we've got going on right now. But dogs know about the power of no, and no strengthens relationships because it puts up walls of respect around you and your thinking, how your mind ideology goes. And it gives you your safe space that we're all crying about, that we need a safe space. Well, these safe spaces are all self-defined, but you don't declare them and you don't keep them unless you're willing to say the word no. So boundaries are set with the word no. But allowances are also made because with the word no, many times there's a way for the person who is being told no to find a way into the discussion by a proper door or argument that might be being put down by the person saying no. So doors and walls, they work. They help you maintain who you are and help you maintain your safety in your relationships, in your space, and in your thinking. No is the word that many people need to hear. And it's out of a sense of love that we need to help them learn no. Because we know that by them continuing on with this improper thinking that they might be exhibiting at this point, call it craziness if you want, a lot of these people have arrived at their particular ideologies or mindful thinking at this point because too often in their earlier development or formation, they were told by well-meaning people who told them that they can do anything. You can't let anybody tell you what you can and can't do. You can do anything. Well, we all know as we get older and start collecting a paycheck that that's not the truth. You can probably do anything, but you may not eat, and you may not have a place to live, and you may not have any friends or family around you, and you might be completely isolated, but you can do anything. So in that regard, they're probably correct. What happens when we don't say no? Well, when we don't say no, when we're trying to train somebody or form them or establish our own spaces and our own comfort zones in our relationships, there are no walls or boundaries and nothing matters. So you become inconsequential to the argument, the debate, or the situation because the other person's demand for getting it their way is going to supersede your benign intent to be nice. So being nice is not the way to go through this, but being able to say no and being disciplined from a point of strength and knowledge is where you want to be staying on this. So you want to make sure you're on firm ground with that. So don't sit there and have a wiffle waffle point of view on things. Know what you're talking about, know the reasoning behind it, and then stand on that ground. These are all tough things to do because for the last 40, 50 years, everyone's told to be nice, everyone's okay, you can't say that about somebody. But when you turn around and see that you didn't say something about somebody, then 2 weeks later you find out that this person is really messed up. Somebody says, well, why didn't you say something? Well, why didn't you? This is what we got to ask ourselves. So when you don't say no, you subordinate yourself and subject yourself to somebody else's wrongful thinking. Can anyone see that going on in the world right now around them? I'll give a few moments for you to weigh in on that. Now, no is a very strong word in many ways. Now, let's go back in the Wayback Machine about 500 some years. And what was going on in the world at that time with the church and the emperors and the monarchies and the governments of Europe to where Catholicism was spreading. There were problems, a lot of problems, mainly because nobody was saying no. And what you had was random and unskilled and untrained priests and bishops running around promoting the church, maybe in acts of goodwill, but in bad formation. They didn't have the training. At that time, it was fairly easy to become a religious person or priest or whatever. There wasn't a whole lot of book learning that went with it. It was kind of like being a doctor back in those days. You got a bag of herbs, and you had some experience from your grandparents as to how these things worked, and you went out and you tried to do your best with the people in your village or wherever to try to be their doctor. Well, a lot of the same things happened with these priests and things like that. Not saying it was bad. It was what they were working with at that time. They didn't have communication skills as far as being able to write stuff down and print it in mass. They didn't have these things available to them. They didn't have the scalability that we have today. So everything was very much on a very slow, progressive march as it went from this place to that place and moving around person to person. It built 100,000 people at a time. It was built one at a time, from sister to cousin, from cousin to brother. It went by people's active belief and seeing the results of changes that were happening in other people's lives around them. That was the ecumenical, response that was there. It was going out to everybody at that point. And some people grabbed hold of that, and other people said, looks interesting. I'll sit and I'll see what happens here. So, the governments were getting a little irritated with the Catholic Church folks, and so they put pressure on the Catholic Church to do something. So they formed the Fifth Lateran Council, and I think that was around 1512, and it went on for about 5 years or so, maybe more, maybe less. But these things didn't move quickly, and so people had to travel, things had to be written down, people had to discuss stuff, but these bishops were all getting together. But they had the Fifth Lateran Council to try to bring some strength and integrity into the mold that was going on. And then all these bishops and everybody, they all went back home. And then what did they do? Nothing. They did nothing. They sat there and they went about the same old way that they were doing things, and nothing moved forward. And so the kings and the queens and all the hierarchy of these countries, another 40 years, 30 years goes by, and they go, hey, look, we told you before, and now you're not doing it. This is the last time we're going to give you a shot at this. Otherwise, we're going to shut you down. And they were going to basically make things of a national religion or whatever. They were going to basically shut down a lot of the operations of the Catholic Church and things like that. They weren't going to protect them. I don't know exactly what all was said, but, it was a big step. So in the Council of Trent then was formed in 1546, and it went on for almost 20 years, like 15 to 17 years it went on. But this was dealing with the Protestant Reformation. And it really didn't do much with the Protestants except to activate Martin Luther more. But one of the things that did come out of the Council of Trent was the formation of seminaries for priests. And so the priests were able to go to these seminaries where they would have somebody would act as eventually their mentor. And today we have our young priest candidates in the seminaries. They work with somebody called a formator. Now the formator is supposed to help with the formation of these young priest candidates and to try to help them in dealing with the work in their not only their eventual parishes, hopefully, but also in their spiritual life and development, and to focus on the work of our Lord and not of the world. And how has this gone? Well, let's go back. Martin Luther, he wasn't necessarily wrong about the Catholic Church at that time. Not at all. The church was messed up, and he was too, and he was not necessarily wrong about it. But what he was wrong about was the theology. And when he screwed up the theology and his thinking there and changed it around, and a lot of people say, well, he's right, and well, let's talk about that. Well, when he did that, it went from being the church to opening the door to hundreds, if not thousands, of churches all over the globe with millions of followers today. They're all watered down in theology from the basic Catholic teaching, which is okay by their standards. But to me, it's kind of like drinking 2% milk. It still has milk fat in it, but it doesn't have the nutrition that whole milk can give you. And so this is the difference in when you have the true presence in the Eucharist and you have communion as a community building thing or a representation, of the Last Supper and Jesus's asking of us to eat his body and drink his blood at the Last Supper. So we'll get into that in future episodes here. But what happens when we do say no? Well, dialogue begins and monologues stop. And authority or totalitarianism in some of these instances is resisted. So the first thing that stops with an oppression or a put down or a suppression of things is to use your voice and say, no, I need either further explanation on this as to what you're saying and trying to put across here, or no, I'm not going to go along with this thinking because it disturbs me so much and goes against what I've been taught in the past and what I know from what my Bible teaches me and what my Lord has asked of me. So there's room in here for movement, so I'm not saying everything is absolute. But I know a lot of people are going to get irritated with me, but in a lot of ways, the Catholic Church is a totalitarian organization. They have votes on things and things like that, but the Pope always has the ability to sit there and shut things down and start things up. Now, when things are resisted, a lot of times the people in authority or at the top are going to crack down because they don't want you saying anything that goes against what they're trying to administer, even if it's wrong. So when you do say no, you risk being canceled. And I know that very directly, and it happened to me, and it's not nice, and it didn't need to happen. But people get canceled by others in authority for saying no, and the Catholic Church did that back in October to two of the strongest conservative voices in the North American Catholic Church. The first one was when Bishop Strickland in Tyler, Texas, was shut down and removed for his stance on things in opposition to what, just questioning basically what Pope Francis was saying. And then Cardinal Burke, Raymond Burke, was shut down as well, and he was told that his services are no longer required, but he's still operating, and we're hopefully still staying with our 9-month novena here for our country that he started. But he was shut down as well. Now, there's another situation of a Divine Mercy priest down in Texas that was shut down by the San Antonio Archbishop. Still looking into that one. This guy was putting stuff on his website about messages he said he was getting in his dreams that had to do with Pope Francis and the state of the church right now. Well, the bishop down there didn't like it, told him to take it down. Well, instead, what this guy did was he put up another posting, which followed through, and the original mission he thought he had was to deliver this information to the world. And the bishop said no. He said, well, I've got to do what I feel the Lord has asked me to do. And so that bishop then defrocked this priest in a matter of days. So that all happened. Now, when we don't say no, what happens in our church and the politics that goes with it, and what happens with our people in the pews? Well, Cardinal Mueller from Germany is now calling for Biden's excommunication. Well, no shit. Come on. We've been asking for this for the longest time. Don't sit there and pee on our leg and say it's raining. The man and his party are adamant about allowing the death and destruction of babies in the womb, as somebody has a right to take somebody else's life. Now, the church has a system of dealing with people like this, and what they're supposed to do is try to counsel them and correct them, and when they don't correct their ways, excommunication is not a death sentence, it's an ultimate correction mode. So why aren't they doing it? I'll tell you why. It's because of politics. It all started back in 1546 with the Council of Trent. And that was when the Catholic Church got in bed with the governments and the politics going around, and they've been bedfellows ever since. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's how they survived. I'm just telling you what's going on. So get out of line. Why? Because they won't do it to themselves. They just won't. They've had a history of doing this. We have to stand. I'm not going to say that everyone is like that, but we have too many instances like this going on. The good priests and bishops need to stand up, keep saying what you're doing. Okay, we'll talk about you guys here coming up next. But the bad guys need to be held accountable. Why are people not going to church? Why are people not putting money in the collection plate? Because the church isn't standing up for its own rules. You want to get people back in the seats? Let's take Nancy Pelosi. Let's take Joseph R. Robinette Biden, whatever he wants to call himself, and let's excommunicate these people and these other prominent politicians. Let's stand for something, and let's make this work. Until you do, it's never going to get the credibility that it needs in this world. And all you're doing is kicking the can down the road, which is exactly what they did with the Fifth Lateran Council and then the Council of Trent. They passed all these rules and stuff like that, and then they just kicked the can down the road and didn't do a damn thing. So Fulton Sheen said it's up to you, us, the members of the church, to keep our priests and our bishops honest and keep their integrity, because they're going to fall by the wayside. It's been the history. They're people. Okay, so what we really have to do is we got to make sure that you got to keep your nose out of their asses, and you got to keep your ears and eyes on their actions. If you see something, say something. Don't sit there and glad hand them and give them the great receiving line applause that they're so used to. I mean, if they earn it, yeah, okay. But if they're doing something bad, don't sit there and say, "Oh, did you see what Father did?" No. You sit there and you go to Father and say, "Look, that's not what I was taught. I don't see why that is what you're doing. What are you doing?" Let them explain. And if they're off base on it, their formation wasn't there, we need to correct them. These guys can all be, saved. They can all be salvaged, just like these bad dogs that I get in. They just need training. And they need to be told the word no. So let's stand up for purity, because Our Lady's in dire need of our help. Say no in these situations and know how to do it correctly. When somebody is standing up in front of you and obviously telling something false, I had a situation. I was at a Costco at the checkout line. There's a guy with a beard wearing a dress, and the only person in the whole store wearing a dress, besides one of the customers maybe. But this guy was trying to make a statement as being a checkout person at Costco, wearing a dress and a beard, and trying to make a statement. And I came up and said, "Hey, dude, how's it going?" Well, got all upset. And 3 other members of the staff then got around me and says, "Who are you calling dude?" I said, "Well, this guy." "Well, she's a lady." I said, "To hell she is." I said, "That's a dude." Well, guess who didn't get their stuff and got escorted out of Costco that day? Oh, well, Walmart was open. So we have to stand up for these things. I'm going to talk more about this later on. I'm going to talk about what happens when corrections are made. And I'm going to talk about also what happens when priests and bishops lie and what happens. And we're also going to look into situations of how the Catholic Church and all the churches now are in bed with the politicians. We're going to talk about this immigrant invasion that's going on right now is all orchestrated in the foreign countries where these people are emanating from. Who do you think is putting all these people on the buses and on these planes and flying them in? It's not the U.S. government. It's NGOs. Who's one of the largest NGOs out there? Catholic Charities. So let's ask some questions and find out why Catholic Charities is putting all these people on planes and on these marching trails and bringing them into the country and putting all these burdens on everybody else. I mean, fair and reasonable and judicious immigration, I'm all for it. But this is a false immigration. This is not real. I tell you, if I was being persecuted and I was running for my life, I would not be wearing designer clothes. I would not be wearing Nike tennis shoes. You know, I would have all my stuff with me, and I would probably look really disheveled and pretty ragged if I'd walked across 12 countries, allegedly, to get to a gate at the southern port of this country. I'm not seeing people worn out from the misery of a long trek. Could be all wrong. Let's see where it goes. I'm just saying that what I'm seeing and hearing isn't matching up with the rhetoric that's being told. So let's get this all on our minds. Let's have a beautiful Easter. Let's remember our Lord's victory over death and sin. And let's try to remember, we're going to get through this. But hang in there, everybody, because I love you. And I'll be back. Take care.